I think the point of fashion is not to get bored with looking at somebody. I think the point of clothes for women should be, one, that you're noticed, two, that you look sexy, and three, that you feel good. I can't see that we wear them to keep warm.
Mary somehow knew what a girl in the street wanted.
The miniskirt.
She just picked up what was in their subconscious.
We wanted to dance to the Beatles. We wanted to wear miniskirts.
We don't want to look like a duchess.
Who turned the miniskirt into a worldwide phenomenon? And without a doubt, it was Mary Quant.
Youth at the time was a lot about wearing something that old people didn't like.
Oh, I can't say that I particularly approve.
English fashion has always been notoriously rebellious.
She was an innovator, she was a rule breaker, she empowered women.
Clothes are a sort of statement about oneself or what one wants to be.
What she did was liberate those girls. She gave them a context.
It was a really rich period of change, and fashion was a huge part of this.
If a designer really catches the fashion editor's eye, anything is possible, really.
This amazing British woman with this sense of freedom and disruption and innovation really created a global look.
I found it difficult to believe when I first met her that she really was this bundle of dynamite that had changed everything in fashion from the way it was previously.
I think in a funny way, must have anticipated what people wanted.
Was this just chance, do you think?
Absolute chance, absolute luck. I mean, I think luck really is timing.
She walks, she moves so fine, like a flamingo. When she walks by, she brightens up the neighborhood. Oh, every guy would make her his if he just could, if she just would.
I really think it in a way goes back to the war. It was an extraordinary reaction at the end of the war when we'd won a war and lost so much at the same time. So there was a new generation came romping through with huge confidence and high spirit. And the generation that should have been controlling everything just let us do it.
Brought up in Wales, in Pembrokeshire. What sort of childhood did you have?
Oh, blissful, because I loved Pembrokeshire. My brother more or less ran wild, you know, over the cliffs and studying the birds and scrambling. We would take off from morning and just
That doesn't sound like the daughter of Welsh Baptist school teachers somehow.
Well, the war was on, you know, we were being shunted from one school to another.
Oh, and
we managed to escape school for, you know, whole summers on end.
I think Mary Quant had a really extraordinary time during the Second World War. I mean, she roamed a bit wild around the countryside, playing cricket and hanging out with her brother Tony and having a good time. Sort of quite tomboyish existence almost. And I think maybe that period of relative freedom really stayed with her.
I was the usual split personality as a child. 1 minute climbing trees, only wanted to play with the boys and throw stones and steal apples and all the rest of it. But equally there's the other side, where I was adored dolls and clothes.
Most girls are guided in their dress sense by their mothers. How were you dressed when you were a child?
A cousin with a very good little girl never wore her clothes out. And though they were completely right for her, I knew they were wrong for me. I had a square face, and I was a tough, stumping little thing, not pretty at all. And they were just utterly wrong. I knew this from the age of 3 and became completely self-conscious about clothes from that age on.
I used to start doing things to my school uniform, hitching it up to be more daring. I like my skirt short, mainly because I wanted to run and catch the bus. I saw no reason why my childhood shouldn't last forever.
It seemed to me, that all the naturalness went as you grew up and you had to wear these terrible artificial things. I thought children were much more beautiful. And I wanted to keep this sort of element of, youngness in clothes. The day I was 13, I cried all day because old age had struck.
This meant what to you?
Growing up meant to me, getting into stockings and suspenders, what you call them, garters, don't you? And high heels and having artificial hair and artificial nails. Bosom that came into the room about 2 minutes before the rest of you. And all horrors of what appeared to me being adult would bring on.
The leftover from the end of the 40s and the very early 50s was still celebrating the hourglass figure.
The big moment in fashion post-war was absolutely the arrival of Christian Dior's new look, which was actually, in a way, a sort of a reaction, a response to the tragedy and horror of war and a desire to return to a time pre-war, a more nostalgic time.
In the beginning of the 20th century, fashion simply wasn't a very English thing to do. I think the French owned it, really.
The period of the 50s is often described as a golden age of couture, and it was. But couture, of course, is about making specific dresses and clothes for specific customers, for a super elite, a super rich, entitled clientele in Paris. That world was so restrictive and so small that a generation of new young women grew up who wanted something reflective of the modern era.
I hated fashion the way it was. I wanted clothes to be far more casual and easygoing and yet sort of sexy and things. We don't want to look like a duchess, and we certainly don't want to look like a duchess the way a duchess looked 2 years ago. I wanted to design clothes for real-life people. I wanted to design clothes for young people.
Fancy that. You got a lot of your sort of basic ideas for designs or your training in designing, thinking out of design from art college.
Contemporary culture owes almost everything, I think, to the art school culture in the UK in the 50s and 60s.
Do you think that you would have been just as good a designer if you hadn't been to the art school?
Oh, no. And I think I was lucky that I had a general training rather than being allowed to specialize so early.
Went to some cutting classes, found myself a table there at Goldsmiths and got on with what I wanted to do. And nobody said, no, you're not supposed to do it like that. So there I was. I just started making and designing clothes for people like me, other art students.
When I was at Goldsmiths, we went up to the Royal College for the Friday night dances. That was where it was happening, as the phrase was at the time.
It was good because we understood each other's art. We were all one gang, really.
The thing about Mary is that she's a nice Welsh country girl, really, come up to London, and she meets Alexander, who is this long, gangly aristocrat, fun-loving, confident person.
There was a lot of theatre with my dad. spent most of his time at Goldsmiths walking around with a film canister under his arm because he was involved in some kind of film project. You know, he had a way about him. He had a charm and charisma that just whipped everybody up and wanted to go along for, this amazing ride. He lived a lifestyle that was very intoxicating. You know, he very much was a muse and an inspiration for her.
How did I meet her? Well, I didn't meet her the first time. The first time was at the Chelsea Arts Ball, end of my first term at art school. I hadn't ever seen her at the art school, which was quite a big place, but on the great float which came past, which was our art school's float, was this enormous pile of balloons, this practically naked girl sitting on top. And I didn't exactly fall in love with her at first sight, but I just had this great sort of surge of lust. And I determined to try and make friends with her next term. So I sort of found out where she was and that sort of thing, and joined the same life class. I was terribly shy. And one day I just went up and said, could I borrow some drawing pins because I don't have any? And she said yes. So I was so emboldened by that, I asked her to the cinema or something that evening, and she came. And we never looked back except in anger since then.
They very quickly became an item, which in those days was rather frowned upon.
He was like really tall, 6'2", and all the girls loved him, kind of like a bit of an impoverished aristocrat, and he had this kind of air of confidence about him. And Mary was, obviously, they adored each other because they complemented each other.
He had all those qualifications of knowing people who were socialites, and she had that inner resilience, curiosity, creativity.
I think what Alexander brought to the party was a sort of insouciance and devil-may careness. I think it was like, yeah, whatever, let's be bad. Let's be even worse than bad. Let's push the social mores as far as we can. He realized that needed to be done.
Well, what I want to know, first of all, Mary Quant, is whether you saw yourself right at the beginning as a revolutionary.
No. We saw ourselves as sort of outcasts, really, and trying to somehow gang together in Chelsea. With very few other people who felt as outcasts as we did.
Why were you outcasts?
Just didn't like the way things were, didn't like the way things looked, the way people lived.
My first job was in a workroom making hats, £2.10 a week for rich people who were duchesses and lady this and lady that. And it would take me 5 days to make one hat for one lady blogs to go to Ascot, and it would rain, and she'd bring it back the next day and say, my husband doesn't like it. And the whole thing, it got through to me that this was sort of unrealistic, out of date and nonsense, that one person couldn't spend 5 days making a hat for one woman. That was tough, because I had to live on it.
Things were rather grim then.
Were they so very grim?
They were a bit gloomy if you were very young. You had no money, no independence. So we wanted a more casual way of life and a pleasanter way of life.
Well,
and
now
when
you're
you see the coffee
you couldn't
bars
live at a
came along, this was another revolution.
I met Mary Quant through her boyfriend then, Alexander Plunkett Green, in my coffee bar, and got to know him. He used to come.
My father, Archie McNair, was one of the founders of that Mary Quant business, and he was the chairman of Mary Quant, I think, from the start of it until when he retired in 1987.
He didn't look the part at all. I first met him, he came in wearing, I think he was wearing a bowler hat, umbrella and briefcase and all this sort of thing. And I thought, good God, but in fact, made great friends with him. And he was, I think, the first person to see what was happening in Chelsea. Clearly, from any point of view, and from our point of view, from a commercial point of view.
One of his early ventures was a coffee bar, number 128 Kings Road. He had the first, or I think had the second espresso machine in London in the mid-50s.
We
Well, the King's Road was the place. Everyone went down the King's Road for coffee houses more than anything. Although it's very fashionable now, it was far more colourful and it was just very exciting.
Gradually, a lot of young people started showing their creativity, whether they're painters or artists or poets or filmmakers or photographers and would-be models. Everybody sort of intermingled, and it was a really good, fun buzz.
And there were lots of these kind of young people's club. I don't know what they called them, R&B clubs. The old trad bands were trying to funk up the music a bit. It changed the whole shape of what English musicians were doing. It was all up for grabs, you know.
You know, this was, after all, 10 years before the Beatles, I suppose, were getting on that way. And I wore hair more or less down to my shoulders, and Mary wore skirts halfway up her thighs, and everybody else was wearing them 4 or 5 inches below the knee.
I think that when you meet really special artists, musicians and designers who have got a special talent like that, they can't help themselves and it will come out one way or another.
I've become more and more interested in this idea of, well, at least that there were a few people like me who didn't want these clothes that existed even before you got into them.
I had this girlfriend who was interested in clothes, and I was interested in clothes too. And he was interested in expanding his businesses in the King's Road, and so we all three got together, and that was the start of the thing.
I persuaded them to start a little shop in the King's Road, which we call Bazaar.
I didn't know anything about clothes and fashions and so forth, but I did have faith in Alexander and Mary. I thought they were both able people and actually to get it right.
Alexander had the promotional skills, Mary had the creativity, and Archie McNair, who had trained as a lawyer, was a businessman.
I think they put up about 5,000 each, and we started Bazaar, I suppose the first boutique in London, and I made the clothes for it, and so it was where, you know, full step in, nobody said you can't do it, we just did it.
When she opened Bazaar in 1955, the sort of thing she wanted to sell in Bazaar just wasn't available. So she knew she'd got to design and make it herself.
And we used to go into various manufacturers and say, we want to buy some dresses, please. If they weren't absolutely rude, they'd go through the pretense of taking an order from us, and the stuff would never turn out. They just didn't believe in these kids at the shop, you know.
The thing was, we opened the door of the shop, and there was a queue, and people were 4 deep outside, and people just flooded in.
Bazaar was a funky, lively little boutique, and it was like a light went on. I mean, it was just fantastic colour and exuberant and young. So it was a sort of social scene as well.
It was very unorthodox. People had to take their clothes off in the middle of the floor and try things on out of the packing case because there was really only one changing room, and it was such a success. We were just bowled over from the day we opened.
I mean, what I find amazing was her windows. You know, the fact that she realised that their mannequins were all completely wrong for the clothes that she was doing and had these mannequins made in, like, really cute, sort of, like, boxy shapes.
Suddenly seeing these windows with these lithe, sporty mannequins and these clothes that we actually wanted to buy ourselves had nothing to do with our mothers.
And she really designed on sort of an ad hoc basis. She had no formal training as a fashion designer. They were buying Butterick patterns, they were adapting them, they were being sewn up in the flat. She would take them to the shop to sell them and then go and buy more fabric. And that's really how it started.
I designed for myself and for my friends.
But enough of them bought your clothes to keep you afloat at the beginning?
Yeah, it's rather too many. It exploded sort of under us. And I think we spent many years dashing along trying to keep up.
She was an early mod, very cool, very streamlined looks, a fashion that really rebelled against everything that we saw in the 1950s.
I remember buying an outfit of Mary's. It was purple for a start, and I'd never seen anything purple before, but it was a sort of tight top and
swinging skirt that did actually move when you walked.
In the clothes that she created, you could run for the bars, you could do what you want. You felt great.
I think Mary became so successful because she literally gave people clothes they could move in. I mean, there weren't clothes you could move in.
The clothes were very short and very simple. The shoes were very flat so that you could run, dance, jump, you know. In fact, all the clothes are very simple, but put together they have a very strong look that said somehow, look at me, isn't life marvellous?
The modern woman is sexy, witty, polished, and dry cleaned.
It may seem a very everyday concept now, but she was the first person, really, that designed pinafore dresses. They could wear a skinny ribbed sweater underneath during the day when they were working, put different shoes on, and go straight out in the evening.
I think Mary Quant's use of textiles were key to what she did. Rough tweeds, she used linens, plain fabrics, simple colors, and she really wanted to create something youthful and sophisticated.
Lots of people had gingham curtains in the kitchen, but nobody had ever made a red and white gingham skirt. I think it must have been copied by every girl who walked past the window bazaar.
I loved all those bold black and whites.
I bought men's suitings from Harrods, tunic dresses from these pinstripe men's suitings of Prince of Wales and checks and things like that.
She had this kind of way of changing classics. I did a shoot and the editor was trying to explain to me about the male cardigan that became the female cardigan. It was because of Mary Quant.
Persuaded knitwear manufacturers to make men's cardigans, like Rex Harrison cardigans, about 10 inches longer, which was a very short dress length, and had elongated shirts made, I called dresses.
She would take the undergarments that men would wear, jersey in particular, and turn them into the kind of clothes that became the Mary Quant statement.
Mary really understood colour. She'd put 2 or 3 colours together and you think, what? And then when you put them together, they looked amazing.
The colours were strong, sort of parroty greens and maroon and plum and yellow ochre and purples and so on. And the legs would be covered in the same sort of colour. I persuaded theatrical manufacturers to make tights in all the colours of the clothes.
We didn't have tights before Mary Quant. We had stockings. She invented tights, if you like.
She designed for the girls in the street, ordinary girls. She just picked up what was in their subconscious. And that was the magic about her products. As soon as people saw it, they went for it.
She had a very clear vision. She was always quite clear on what she wanted. And it took off, and in 2 years, they'd opened the second bazaar, which was much larger, and that was completely designed by Terence Conrad. And then it just went from there.
The clothes I produced were so acceptable to the Chelsea girl at that time. She was far more emancipated than the equivalent French girl. I mean, the young in England were in that mood.
It is handy if you can discover, or seem to discover, a trend in society. I'm only asking you whether you felt conscious that you were pioneering a trend.
No, I didn't. I really didn't. But you see, I think this is what a designer is. I feel that a designer has to be someone who's permanently bored of the way people look at any particular time. I'm wanting to live in the future, wanting to change things.
When fashion resonates, it's always in tune with activism in some respects. And when you look at the chronology of politics, especially feminist politics, you can kind of see how fashion has evolved. So when you put the spotlight on the 60s and you put the spotlight on Mary Quant, there's a clear correlation between the women's movement and the clothes that she was designing.
What do we want? Equal education! So
some men have still got the idea of the Victorian era, like, you know what I mean, where they come home drunk and bash you about, you're only good enough to have children and get married. You should be allowed to have your own feelings, to have your own life, not be dominated by men all the time. I mean, it's ridiculous, because half the men of this world are wrong in any bloody case, you know what I mean?
I want to be understood.
Sure you do, Susan. We all want to be understood. Even your mother.
I think a woman had to be and had to dress and had to act the part of the way the man in her life saw her. And she was never allowed to dress the part of being her.
They were sort of perfect princesses, cooking and cleaning for their husbands, wearing immaculate sort of twin sets and pearls and petticoats and lace.
But don't forget your greatest attachment, your husband.
Clothes are a sort of statement about oneself or what one wants to be.
It was about responding to a need in women, responding to not just a need, but a demand that they have clothes that reflected who they were.
And don't tell me what to do.
Given the pill, that was the only contraceptive that actually worked, a woman could then really be in charge of her own life, decide when she had children.
The pill, contraception, helped to liberate you. It did.
And this allows her then to plan both a private life, a family life, and a career life.
Mary's vision was to bring clothes to young working girls. You know, these are girls that had their first pay packets. They were the first girls to have jobs and a career.
It was the first time that women could plan and have their own careers.
If you stay on in the service, it offers a career which can lead to the very top.
And therefore the first time they had their own money and made their own choices.
I think a revolution was going on which fashion people hadn't realized. I think the change of focus had gone from the rich international couture thing to young working girl herself. She was going to sort of set the pace in fashion, decide what was right and what was wrong.
She knew who she was aiming at.
Mary herself said that it was her customers going into bazaar that really the miniskirt evolved from.
I think she started the miniskirt, didn't she?
That is the #1 question.
She started the miniskirt.
Did Mary Quant invent the miniskirt? Something that people will discuss forever.
Didn't she?
Didn't she? Didn't she?
Is the mini truly yours?
Oh, yes, because the Chelsea girl, you know, she had the best legs in the world. She wanted the short skirts, the badges making them.
So it's
And she wore it. She had the courage to wear it. My God.
I know that the French guy reckoned it was him.
In 1961, this new designer, André Courrèges, showed this couture collection in Paris with skirts 1 or 2 inches above the knee.
She called it the miniskirt because she loved the mini car and she thought it was a wonderful name.
They called it the miniskirt, but really at that point it was just a skirt above the knee. I mean, even the Queen was wearing a skirt above the knee.
Mary was the one that got them shorter and shorter.
The girls that came in to buy would say, I want my skirt length shorter, 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 shorter.
The London girl was rolling them up an inch shorter, Simon, and I'd go an inch shorter, and then, you know, it just, can't say it grew up with the opposite.
You know, you looked around and your friends' skirts were shorter and you thought, oh. And you said, Mum, will you shorten my dress with me? You didn't shorten it by an inch, because that didn't mean anything. So you shortened it by 3 inches. And then once tights were available for everybody, you could have that as short as you wanted. So they got shortened again. So they ended up like 6 inches, 8 inches above the knee.
I thought the idea of a miniskirt was designed by a guy because, you know, you'd go in the back of a pub or R&B club and the miniskirt was perfect for that.
The whole 1960s was one massive party, which was super lovely.
Women may now be irreversibly emancipated. If that is so, we're entering a quite different kind of society.
Literally, for thousands and thousands of years, women had had to worry about whether sex was going to make them pregnant. And suddenly, for the first time in history, you could have sex and you didn't have to worry. And I think this freedom went to everybody's heads.
With the 60s, there wasn't guilt. It was about living in your body and enjoying things.
And whether it's to be attracted or whether it's to be happy with being yourself and confident with being yourself, or both, or all these things, you know, the clothes can very much help you play these roles.
Wear these clothes, be the kind of woman that you want to be. For kids today in, you know, the 21st century, that's a sort of given. But back in the 50s and 60s, her clothes gave permission for women to be the person that they wanted to be.
What she did was liberate those girls. She gave them life. She gave them a context.
I can see very easily looking back. I mean, clothes are marvellous and they demonstrate so, sometimes absurdly, the exuberance of the mood then. The kind of, wow, look at me, I'm free, I'm female, I'm alive, and isn't it smashing to be female?
The miniskirt was just so much fun, and it epitomised the fun and the frivolity of the 1960s in the King's Road.
Like so many things in fashion, I don't think one person often really designs a particular trend. It's an emergence.
Who turned the miniskirt into a worldwide phenomenon? And without a doubt, it was Mary Quant.
But Mary, isn't the miniskirt rather obvious, simply blaringly enticing? After all, it seems that few girls really have the legs, hips, and above all, the panache to carry it off majestically.
But who wants to be majestic?
People either loved what I was doing or hated it.
Many times there'd be people in the street who'd just go,
Like some old gentlemen used to come in and sort of really shake their umbrellas at me.
Well, I can't say that I particularly approve of some of the styles.
Shout obscene, disgusting, degenerate, you know. And they couldn't explain why it was obscene or degenerate, except that to them, to certain people, it was.
Youth at the time was a lot about wearing something that old people didn't like and think must be good. It was a time of experimentation, like with drugs and fashion and especially music.
The Beatles, they sounded like an R&B band, but their songs were about love and girls and that sort of teenage stuff. The Stones were rebellious, popular because they were confident and arrogant and glamorous. Both bands, they changed the way that we looked at ourselves, they changed the way that we dressed. I often talk about The Who being on stage, looking at their audience, copying what people in the audience were wearing, so that the following week we would be wearing what the people in the audience were wearing the week before. We would get the credit for the fashion changes.
Mary Quant was quite conscious of the fact that she was at the heart of a youthquake. She knew by the time we get to the 60s that what was happening around her reflected what she was doing in fashions.
Mary Quant's first show that I ever saw, the models came kind of dancing in. They were full of life, and it was just elevating. I think we all wanted to stand up and cheer.
Alexander understood presentation. He understood this thing of sexy young girls doing fun shows and with music. He would put all that together.
When you did her show, she didn't want everybody just mincing down the catwalk exactly the same. She wanted the personality of each individual girl to show her outfit.
The models all had the new Vidal Sassoon short swinging hair, as Mary herself had.
More than 60 outfits from the Quant collection presented in a manner that leaves the spectators and the models breathless.
We
I'm not really concerned with the design in the way that Mary and her gang are, and I wouldn't attempt to interfere in what the design should be, ever. But I am, of course, concerned in the business of bringing this thing to the attention of the public.
Plunket Green was the wind beneath her wings and sheltered her and enabled her to sort of get on with all the creative side of things. And also, I think he gave her some confidence to go out into the wide world.
She and Alexander and some business people decided that they would take a few models to New York and show off Mary's collection of clothes and introduce her basically to America. And I think at that time, America was very behind England in the fashion way. And we came downstairs for breakfast wearing our trouser suits, our Mary Quant's trouser suits, feeling cool, you know, walking in, and they wouldn't let us in because we were wearing trousers.
You would go into a hotel, you get in a lift, and then people would say, oh, where'd you get that haircut? And what about this? And what about that? And they all wanted to know and be part of this whole new look.
She went to New York, not with great aspirations to become a kind of multi-global fashion entity, but it happened almost by mistake because what she was doing connected with the zeitgeist. And I think it was Women's Wear Daily that saw her collection and just went crazy for it and went, you know, this is it. You know, this is what we want to be wearing. This is what the, you know, girls of America want to be wearing.
They were absolutely mad for Mary Quant and would sort of look at her in a rather different way than because she was so swinging London.
And it's a certain Britishness that the world needed at the time. You know, America was so obsessed with the British invasion.
The cries of the crowd grow in pitch and volume, drowning out the fire.
When the Beatles entered New York, there was pandemonium.
3,000 screaming teenagers are at New York's Kennedy Airport to greet, you guessed it, the Beatles. This rock and roll group has taken over as the kingpins of musical appreciation among the younger element.
It was quite extraordinary to see it and slightly terrifying as well because they were going completely mad. You know, like, oh my God, they're screaming at my boyfriend. This is great.
If the Beatles provided the soundtrack, Mary certainly provided all the visual images.
And she was right in the center, giving to the world something that is so British.
And then was the beginning of the Union Jack and Carnaby Street. I think it just caught people's imagination and drew people to this country. It did really start with Mary, and it really put this country on the map.
Clothes by Quant are building a reputation in the States as well.
Very quickly, particularly people like J.C. Penney, realised that Mary could add so much to their sportswear, dresswear, separates collections, and it seemed within a remarkably short space of time, she was producing 4, 6, 8 collections a year for them.
So many things are different in America, as you know very well, that they've got to translate the different fabrics and so on. So they can work from drawings quite a lot, but you must be in touch with the people in their sample rooms and you know, the salespeople have got to be in touch with you, so everybody knows what's going on. I think, you know, I mean, I think it can be terribly exciting, I really do.
Well, it'd be great. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it'd take a hell of a energy, I think, but I'd love to do it, really.
Well,
Be mad.
it's not a question whether you love to do it, you've very well got to do it now.
They were going to meet the head of J.C. Penney, and they were really excited about it, and they're on the way to Washington. So they're all nice and relaxed. They're having champagne and caviar in first class and everything. About 5 minutes before they come into land,
Please be sure your seat backs are in the
a crew member comes up and they say, we just wanted to say that you'll be getting off the plane first because they've arranged for a camera crew, press and photographers to be at the airport. Well, Mary was like, oh, no, and she went into a panic. She got up to go to the loo. She wouldn't come out of the loo. They're knocking on the door, come out. She said, no, I can't. So they let everybody get off the plane. And Mary's looking out of the window and she can see this barrage of photographers and a film crew. And in the end, the press and everybody left. And then she just scurried out and held a bag near her face.
Actually, Mary hates sort of being photographed. I mean, she always, I think, dreads it more than actually hates it when it happens. As you probably observed, is tremendously shy. The awful thing is she's frankly good at it in a way. I mean, she looks like herself. She looks exactly like what Mary Quant ought to look like, and wears her own clothes rather well and so on. You know, I mean, she has sleepless nights before being interviewed by somebody or being photographed, but it has to be done.
I'm sure the working relationship between Mary and Plunkett was the strength of the whole thing.
Because she was very shy, she needed a big personality to sometimes hide behind. And without him, I don't think she could have taken on the role of being the front of the brand. I don't think she could have done it without him.
He was always there at Mary's side, and quite often he would kind of like take the first question and start it off. And then when you could see that she was ready to go as she chipped in, he'd kind of like fade into the background a bit and let her talk. And once she got going, she was fine.
She's a diffident person. Some people say she's shy, but I think she's more, you know, reserved than shy.
Because she had her husband, who was a brilliant impresario, entrepreneur, great at the smooth talking, great at the PR.
Kansas City was fantastic. About 4,000 kids turned up, and they had to get out the fire department because they thought the floor was going to collapse. And then we and the girls all had to have police protection to get us back to the hotel. You know, the Beatles had been there only about a week before, and the whole place is so mad about England. You know, you've never seen anything like it.
You know, my father, you know, brought an energy, but also was incredibly innovative in terms of marketing and PR.
And Alexander also was very good at speaking to the press. I think my father was saying he'd encouraged Alexander to go and take journalists out to lunch because he could see that he just had a very good way with people.
Alexander, you know, he did like to smoke and he certainly liked to drink. So I think that the living was quite 24/7.
I would say, right, who would like tea, who would like coffee? And Alexander would say, Sarah, forget the tea and coffee. We're just going to have gin and tonic. And Mary would say, no, coffee. And we're talking 10 o'clock in the morning here. And Alexander would say, okay, no, just gin and tonics. Mary was always trying to keep him a bit healthier. But he was a fun, big character.
One of the big things that made everybody think of Mary Quant forever was that Alexander said that he'd cut her pubic hair into a heart shape. Well, this was completely shocking because nobody ever talked about pubic hair, ever. So that definitely made an impact. Everybody wanted to know who was this man and who was this woman.
He got tremendous coverage. I mean, the column inches that he achieved on behalf of the Tsar, it would have cost a fortune to buy that sort of space.
You said that you recognize that, in part at least, the phenomenal growth of the idea of the King's Road and the Chelsea set and so forth stemmed from the publicity given to it in the way in which writers wrote it up in magazines.
Fashion editors, they're always out there in the world. They're always seeing what's new, what's hot. And yeah, and if a designer really catches the fashion editor's eye, anything is possible, really.
So the revolution that was taking place in fashion was also taking place in fashion journalism. So in the way that new young designers were making clothes that young people liked, there were new young fashion editors, and there was a wealth of new young magazines.
We had British Vogue, Queen, so there were a few essential magazines, and the fashion editors were really, really powerful.
We chose this girl because she could water ski, and there isn't a single one of her water skiing.
The sort of girls we want to see photographed in our clothes look as real as possible and live as possible.
And then combine that with photographers like Bailey.
There was this kind of bunch of poshies running around creating fashion. But it was about to be broken in half because, of course, David Bailey, he brought this kind of grittiness. And he was just magnificent, a maverick. And Mary adored Terry Donovan, adored him. And he was an incredibly good photographer, both technically, but just the way that he worked with people and the confidence and the love and the fun.
And then let's not forget the models. I mean, the 60s to me was essentially about models.
There had never been anything like her in the history of the world.
You know, Twiggy, Jean Shrimpton, you know, all these incredible English girls.
They had a lot of personality, and I think that was contagious, and people wanted to feel that energy. I have been compared to Twiggy when I was younger, and when I was younger I met her, and she's so lovely, and she kind of took me under her wing a bit. Jean Shrimpton gave me tips on men.
What did she say?
I can't say.
Oh.
It was a time when black models were not exactly used in magazines or shows. You see a hand or a feet or, you know, someone's back. Mary literally put these models out there. She proposed a new idea of beauty.
Mary and Alexander were very much artists. But what they'd lacked was really a great understanding of business and the reality of it.
I had a running battle with Mary about the amount of cloth she bought for her designs. I mean, a huge amount in relation to the turnover of the business. And it was due to the lack of discipline in converting the cloth into clothes. We were losing a lot of money.
I think what he saw is that Mary Quant could be marketed as a brand, and they could, you know, do very well with licensing the brand and also licensing designs.
Archie's concept of introducing licensing meant that Mary would be producing designs for manufacturers like Steinberg's, who produced her Ginger Group ready-to-wear collection. But then they would come up with the manufacture.
Archie was very much the man who pushed the licensing, I think initially against Mary's wishes.
Licensing allows you to extend your brand to new markets, new areas, new categories, which can be really exciting for a brand. But it's about control, and it's about a sense of understanding between the licensee and the licensor. That's where you've got to get it right.
She basically believed she could do it all, and I think probably deep down there was a resentment of anybody trying to help her.
Something about the pockets.
Well, you know, Leon, he'd like to get rid of those pockets altogether, but I think it makes the whole thing. You know, it'll save him 10pence, but so, it makes the dress.
You have to give a little bit in order to gain. And sometimes that's not easy. If you're used to controlling your business 100% creatively, then that's going to be very hard and a struggle.
Nothing went out without her final say-so, but it opened up the opportunity for her to move into all sorts of different accessories.
Made me interested in underwear immediately because I wanted to make a form of underwear which was very much showing the body.
She was the first person to go into all the accoutrements of a girl, you know, specifically into makeup, which I think is one of the big things that she did.
I got involved with the makeup bit because now that the clothes were different, the face was wrong.
She was like, well, we revolutionised the way people wore fashion. The face then didn't match. And the face didn't match because coming out of the 1950s, it was red lips and it was sort of blue eyeshadow. And she just said, I'm sorry, but with the kind of bold colour palette that I'm now using, the face just doesn't match. And so then she decided to then take on cosmetics.
Right, who's got an eyebrow pencil?
The model girls, top model girls like Jean Shrimpton, my friends, we'd be doing shows together, and the way they approached makeup was something quite else. Buying certain sort of theatrical makeup and using a sort of technique which was part colour and part sculpting and illusion.
She kind of watched women sort of taking crayons, you know, using pencils to draw on freckles, putting foundation on their lips to create this new look of this very kind of baby doll aesthetic. She sort of took that and bottled it.
Designer Mary Quant is just one of the breakaway generation who has now dreamed up a revolutionary approach to young cosmetics, which even department stores like Selfridges have taken up.
She did this thing called Loads of Lash, and it was a strip of eyelashes, like in a long strip, and you could just cut off what you wanted. And that's how she was. She kind of like, she hooked onto things, she was alert, she saw ideas.
I'm so messy, I can never find the right brushes and the right bits. So I wanted a box where everything was in the same box.
Packaging was part of that, selling that dream. Coming up with the paint box idea, I mean, it was revolutionary at the time, to actually her thinking about, how do I put on makeup? I've got everything in different places, I make a mess. I'm now gonna put it all in one plastic box.
You lifted the lid and there was eyeshadow and blusher and lipstick all in one with a mirror. Honestly, to this day, it makes me excited thinking of that because that was unheard of. It was so new and different, and Mary's makeup was just, oh, you had to have that.
They were made of plastic, and I love plastic. It was made of plastic. Why don't we apologise and pretend it's gold, you know? It's, you know, 100-carat good plastic.
Did you find that what you were demanding and wanting as a designer was being matched by the capacity of technology to manufacture it?
Yes, I mean, sometimes I think new ideas come from the technology, and sometimes the other way around. Really, it's how I got into this shoe thing, because I've never had a pair of comfortable shoes in my life, and I wanted to make shoes which were like glass or bottles, and have no seams and no bits that rub and all that. But you just pour a kind of chewing gum into a mold, and you get out what you want. And, you know, rather like making a sort of jelly. And so this is how we started making these shoes. And then really, it's like a Cinderella thing. You're walking on air or walking a glass slipper.
I think one of her greatest innovations was not her own. It was actually her ability to get manufacturers to innovate, to actually get manufacturers to go outside their comfort zone.
I know when she did the wet collection, that was an eye-opener because it was so incredibly different. I'd never seen PVC in clothes before, except for a yellow slicker in Grimsby Docks, for example, for the fishermen.
Now came the award. A proud moment, surely, for Mary Quant, honoured by winning the award for Britain.
The business actually was a dream business from the point of view of a fashion designer. So many fashion designers have only been able to turn their ideas and creations into business if they've had a good business partner.
I was ambitious, I think, in a way that neither Alexander nor Mary were. And I was determined to develop the business as best it could be developed. We could keep making a success of what we were doing, but I wanted to expand.
You've got Archie realizes that what Mary is brilliant for is that actually she's a pen and a piece of paper. And those drawings can be sent around the world and turned into hard cash.
Milan.
Sono Mary Quant.
Paris.
La mini-jupe, Mary Quant.
Mary Quant. She was international. Everyone in Europe knew about her. She was big in America.
Last year's American sales alone topped $2 million.
Apparently she was big in Australia as well.
Mary Quant comes to Australia.
This was the great power of Mary Quant. It was the export.
The thing that was growing at that time for them was the cosmetics. And that was becoming a big business.
By 1970, Quant Cosmetics was ginormous. It seemed the whole world was clamouring for Mary's makeup and clothes.
We've got a journalist coming in from Finland. We've got the fittings at Ginger Group in the morning and Little Knitting in the afternoon. I'd really like to talk to you about this USA and Canadian trip because we've got fabric people coming in. Wednesday, of course, you're in Manchester all day to make this commercial radio tape.
Well, which of these can you get me out of?
I thought we didn't need the shops. And so the only real row I ever had with Mary was when I said I'm going to sell the shops. She was furious, and I said, well, you'll be able to design anything you like. You won't be tied to clothes.
She was really one of the first brands to go into licensing in a very, very big way.
It was quite fresh territory, and she didn't know where it was going to go.
What happened was that from being a successful design brand, they went insane.
Mary Quant Limited, one of the most astonishing success stories in the world of fashion, licensing manufacturers on 5 continents.
It was frenetic, absolutely frenetic. We couldn't make it fast enough.
But there are thousands of people working for the manufacturers we design for who are dependent on Mary jolly well coming up with the goods, and if she doesn't do it, she is letting down people and endangering their jobs.
The pressure wasn't so much on Alexander and Archie. It was all about Mary. And, you know, if you're Mary, that's hard.
I'm sure the demands on her were just sort of, we want more and more and more. And until you put boundaries down, I suppose it becomes boundaryless.
Everybody is looking to you for what's next. Everybody is looking to you for the next big thing. Everybody is looking to you to maintain the machine that has been built up on your back. It's just too difficult to maintain that day in, day out. If you think about it, Twiggy only worked for 4 years. She, you know, Twiggy was only a model for 4 years. And the Beatles disbanded in, I think, 1968. Do you know? But Mary had to keep on going.
I think fashion's a pendulum, so it can only go so far, and it's going to move. There's going to be a reaction to it. And I think you had Quant in the early 60s was about the future. They were optimistic, and it was pop. And then I think by the late 60s, there was a disillusionment, and the new generation didn't want that. So they became hippies. It was bohemianism.
It all went into the flower power thing, and floaty dresses, and flared faded jeans.
They looked at vintage fashion, they looked at recycling, upcycling, they were wearing ethnic clothes, so that modernism, the futurism that Mary Quant had brought to fashion was no longer in style.
London physically was an enormously different town from the 60s during the 70s.
From now on, the pound abroad is worth 14% or so less in terms of other
Indications came this afternoon of higher prices.
It had actually gone slow, it had gone dark, it had become almost wetter. The governments were having problems. It was just not the same kind of place. The Beatles, of course, tragically split up in '69, far too early. We hadn't even begun to hear what they had to say, and they were gone. And so things had changed. Things had come to an end, and people pined for the country. I think they watched McCartney sitting on his farm in Scotland with Linda, and everyone had a similar idea.
I'll never forget the video footage of them having a row over clay pigeon shooting.
I got it!
I got it.
I got it!
But, darling, the thrill is falling down dead by the time you're even there.
You missed it.
Right.
I guess you could say they embraced countryside life.
I absolutely love cows. They're the most fascinating, gentle and beautiful animals. 10 live in the fields near my house. I love to talk to them, and they talk to me. There's not many things in life better than falling asleep in a sunny field and being licked on the face and woken by a glorious, inquisitive cow.
Mary had the best of both worlds in that she had the town pad in Alexander Square. And she also had this lovely country house where she still lives.
You know, the thing is as well that Mary very much wanted to have a baby. Very, very much wanted to have a baby. And they tried for a very long time before finally Orlando came along. And I mean, I think that was Mary's personal dream come true.
Hello. It's bedtime. And in Nonsense Land, the trees are red and the grass is blue.
She always had a fantastic relationship with Orlando. And he with her. And I think he filled a big gap for her.
Privacy to me is all important. My relationship with Orlando, although I don't want to hide him away because I'm so proud of him.
I don't know. I think I was always aware that things were different. I was very aware that home was a private place for her. There was a slight atmosphere of a sort of bomb shelter, and it was kind of, you know, where we kind of went to hide, which I think is inevitable when you've got paparazzi at the end of the drive.
Orlando! Hey!
We would go down and see them for lunch or to stay quite often. It was quite sort of Sunday lunchy, quite conventional.
In the early 70s, there were obviously still suspicions that women couldn't work or have a full-time job or a full-time career and juggle a family as well. But she knew she could, and she did it hugely successfully.
Everyone thinks that in the perfume industry, there's lots of women around, women perfumers. I was one of the first female perfumers in those times, and that was, 30 years ago. And it was quite intimidating, really. And I can see that it would be very intimidating for a fashion designer who's then, you know, talking to people that about an industry she doesn't even know so much about.
What do you think people want out of a perfume?
It seems to me that inevitably to be a woman now is a very schizophrenic sort of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the one hand, one has at last the chance, and in fact is very ambitious. At the same time, one wants flattery and prettiness. And I think
there's a duality in women now, which is developing.
Perverse schizophrenia is the mood that I would like to arrive at.
Yes, I would agree entirely. But I think that to satisfy that, you have to come up with two types of perfume. One which will satisfy.
She was a very strong woman in a man's era. And she taught me a lot about how to handle men in that time.
Well, I think you have a point, but I think the modern woman, it's very perverse, and she would then use the so-called evening one in the daytime.
She would come up with some idea or the other, and you'd think, really?
So can we not get both these notes going?
If, like, the guys from ICI or the Wool Board or whatever that made various products would say, oh, we can't do that. That's not possible.
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think that's totally invalid.
Oh, I know you'll be able to find a way.
I don't really, I think this is the modern woman. She is both at the same time.
And she just sat there.
Well, yes, well, we'll work hard at it, but it's very difficult what you're asking.
She smiled at them and didn't say anything. And I'm thinking, gosh, this is getting embarrassing. Okay, we'll see what we can do. She got what she wanted.
She would insist. And of course they did.
In the end, she always got what she wanted.
You can't change Mary's mind. And after working with her for a little while, you began to realize that she was right.
Well, that's just dirty.
To me, your clothes seem much more classical than they were in the 60s. How would you describe them?
I certainly feel the mood for very classical clothes, but modern classics, you know, with a touch of lunacy, and not deliberately so provocative as the mood was earlier. The thing that fascinates me about fashion is it's all about change. As usual, fashion's anticipated a general attitude and economic problems and all sorts of things. And fashion has become, the last 2 or 3 years, very, very classical. Instead of the aggressive look of the 60s, which was natural to its time. But right now, I mean, nobody wants upheaval, nobody wants the drama of wars and so on. And so they leap at nostalgia. And there's this element of nostalgia into everything.
The latest collection hot off the cutting room floor of one of Britain's leading fashion designers, Mary Quant is world famous. With creations like these, we're not surprised.
Fashion is always about change, and I'm designing into the future.
Yes, that does bring me to a rougher question that you almost answered it, in the sense that is yesterday's revolutionary today's establishment figure? Is that you?
Well, it obviously isn't.
I think, you know, it is hard to keep up and keep up. You know, the zeitgeist changes.
The world seemed to be filled with middle-class hippies sort of wearing flares and shuffling up and down the high street. Young people suddenly found they had a sound and lyrics that they could relate to, and that sort of, in a way, mirrored the mood of their Britain.
They were a sort of social revolution because they didn't seem to care about money or fame or success.
How far would you say that, for instance, punk fashions were a product of the kids themselves and the designers caught on to it afterwards?
They were a product of the kids themselves, absolutely. It was a reaction against, you know, manufacturing and the desire to be individual.
Vivienne Westwood, fuck, you know, what an extraordinary creature. What an extraordinary designer. What an extraordinarily powerful and charismatic woman. The King's Road really burst into life. I think Vivienne Westwood and some of her cohorts had 2 or 3 shops.
When you look at Vivienne Westwood, there is that parallel with Mary Quant, both pioneering new ground.
People like Mary Quant made it possible for us to proceed. They set this canvas up for us to jump into, and then we ran with it.
Oh, don't ask me about King's Road, because I hate it.
But I'm a doll maniac. Being asked to work on a doll and design the clothes was absolutely irresistible to me because I really love them.
If I can get it on anybody, then.
Are the glasses straight? Because I've got odd ears, they can be crooked. Are they straight? Yes, they're straight. Right. I'm an illustrator, and I dealt with the packaging. This resulted with the famous logo, which I did first of all. She was a happy-go-lucky character, very into adventure. And they all had names. It was a policy of the firm that everything was named, even the horse. I know it gave Cindy a terrible fright, or Barbie, one of the two. And then, of course, I had the pièce résistance, her underwear. These were the little panties. Did you want me to put them on the doll? You can hardly see them. You can see why they never reached production.
I like to make joyous and happy things, but sadly it always ends too quickly. The future and the fashion pages are for the beautiful and the young, really. And I suppose it always will be.
I was 35, and I knew that Mary was 5 years older than me, and I thought, wow, that means Mary Quant is going to be 40. The queen of youth is going to be 40. So that's what I'll do. I will do an interview with Mary about being 40. And to my amazement, she said she wouldn't do it. And I begged her. I remember sending her a bunch of flowers. I remember ringing her up about 10 times, and she absolutely wouldn't do the interview. I had thought of myself as a friend of hers, so I was quite upset. And in fact, I remained slightly upset in the back of my mind for years. And then I was talking to somebody who'd worked closely with her, and I told her the story. And she said, oh, well, what you don't know is that Mary always lied about her age because she was older than her husband. So she pretended she was 5 years younger than she was. So when you wanted to write about her turning 40, she was actually turning 45, and she didn't want to have to reveal that to anybody.
She continued to design garments, and that went on right through into the 80s.
I think that the brutal practicalities of being a designer is that you do need to sustain your creativity with money. And so licensing, for example, is one way of doing that. And if you can do that with a certain sense of credibility, there's nothing wrong with it.
In fact, fashion came into the house. We didn't want to go out as before.
But now that you are into so many different product areas, how do you manage to keep the Quant image intact when it's to do with duvets and carpets and roller blinds and things that people don't think of in terms of Quant?
Many designers took to licensing at this time, and Mary Quant, perhaps from by modern standards, took it quite a long way, with her name being plastered over a huge variety of products.
Not only furnishings, but things like carpets, wallpapers, paints, and kitchenware, and so on.
Today, when we look back at it through modern marketing eyes, we would probably argue that it was pushed too far.
Mary, what was your experience? I mean, here you are, you've got a massive business network now, 130 shops in Japan. And clearly there's not that great a gulf of understanding in terms of appreciation of your design.
I think from a fashion point of view and from a design point of view, that there's a very, very strong bond.
The way Mary looked really cottoned on. The Japanese girls identified with Mary very well, and they loved her.
All roads led basically to Japan and the makeup leg of her business, which has obviously been, as you say, licensed to the hilt.
What have the Japanese taught you about selling?
Oh, so much. That shopping should be fun.
The Japanese wanted to include all sorts of other products, fashion accessories, in fact. It gradually won Mary over from her stance of saying nobody could do it but her, and so that they were more and more able to produce their own range and present it to Mary for her endorsement.
Japanese people are so wonderful to work with. I've learned so much. I think we can all achieve so much together.
I was finding my work difficult because I go and chair a meeting of a subsidiary company, and I began to think that I didn't really understand what they were saying. So I made the decision to retire, which I was very sad, but in the best interest of everybody, I shouldn't be there. The next morning, I thought, well, yesterday I employed 750 people, now just employ one.
When your father passed away, he was quite young.
Yeah.
Was he in his 50s?
Yeah.
Could you tell me if it was a sudden thing?
But yes, it was relatively. But you know, I don't think if you smoke 60 gitane a day and like a glass of wine, you're not going to last forever.
Well, just terribly sad that he had to go so early on. He was just a great shaft of colour and sunshine which went out of everyone's lives.
They both sparked off each other. They were such good friends as well as obviously lovers, and he was her rock, and it must have been really hard for her because she must have lost part of herself when he died.
When Alexander was alive, she stood behind him. So Alexander was the front. Alexander was the one that did all that showman stuff, and she didn't have to do that. I think then when he died, she had to rethink who she was and how she related
I think losing my father was probably difficult for her to keep passionate. But she's a very proud woman as well, so she certainly kept going because it's, you know, it's so much part of her DNA, and it is what she adores.
Years later, I mean, long after I had retired, Mary asked me to come over and have lunch with her. She had something to discuss. She said, "You'd be proud of me. I've done the most tremendous deal with the Japanese." It meant that it was over to them. That was the end of, I think that was really the end of Quant, as we'd known it anyway.
All good things come to an end. You can't continue with that energy and that vigor. At a certain point, you have to let go.
To actually see someone who was so brilliant, such an innovator, had such an effect on the world in the way that she did, and to not really have that control of her business side of things, I think it must be quite difficult for her.
Well, that is sad, but life is cruel sometimes. Well, it's very competitive.
If you want your brand to have longevity, if you want your brand to exist once you're gone, which I think, you know, if somebody spent a lifetime working to create what they've created, to then, when you aren't around anymore, for that to disappear would be really sad.
It's just the way the cycle of fashion exists. She handed over the reins to somebody who could kind of move her brand on.
Do you think her legacy has lived on?
I mean, the fact that Mary Quant doesn't exist now as a major fashion brand, I think in some respects is neither here nor there, because when you look at her history, it resonates and's got threads through to the things that designers still do today.
As a young fashion designer, how do you see things changing and going forward? Maybe we need to learn we don't need so much?
Exactly. I think we lost the plot a bit. You know, all this fast fashion, and then we fed the machine and we got too greedy.
What's wrong with High Street? It's just completely a rip-off because all those things are made with really cheap labour and they just go into landfill and there's no choice at all.
All that stuff, it's
and
got
I'm
to
trying to do something about fashion. I'm trying to have buy less, choose well, make it last, and that idea has gone everywhere.
Fashion in the 2020s is in a crisis moment, but then so is the whole consumer economy that we all live and operate within.
I mean, we can't carry on the way we were. We can't carry on. It was just too many seasons, too many clothes, too many things that we didn't need. I did an issue with Taylor Swift on the cover and in a vintage Chanel jacket, and the line was, buy better, buy less.
Mass market production now, what's the future for it? Is there a future for it? You know, really, now is the time for us to think about going back to the little boutique. We don't want to be mass producing clothes anymore. We don't want to be using plastic as much. We have got to think of new ways to get young people being creative.
I think there's a real interest not wearing something that's mass produced, but
wearing something that's individual and wearing something that perhaps you've made yourself. And I think from Quant's very early designs, it was about self-expression. She wanted to make something that represented her life and the life of her friends. And I think that it's a key message from Quant.
Mary's legacy was the inner confidence that she engendered in young people to experiment, to have fun.
Exploring, finding out, being inquisitive, trying things out.
To add their own identity to things. Mary really was at the beginning of all that.
London Fashion Week season for autumn-winter 20, Mark Fast was showing on the final morning, and the headlines were all about Mark Fast miniskirts, coloured tights, directly inspired, of course, by Mary Quant, as he fully acknowledged.
I think a lot of designers don't recognize, perhaps, their drawing on Mary Quant's influence.
I think she influenced everybody, from Calvin Klein to
Marc Jacobs or Anna Sui.
It's still current. Her ideas just keep on going forever.
I think that she needs to be remembered by everybody because of all the things that she's done in her life.
The winner of the British fashion industry's Special Hall of Fame Award for Lifetime Achievement is Mary Quant.
Internationally, she is the most well-known British designer, and people still equate her name as synonymous with the miniskirt.
Mary Quant is without a doubt one of the most important British designers ever.
That free yourself, be yourself, amazing quote that she gave the world, and ultimately gave everyone enough courage to free themselves of the shackles of certain clothing.
Yeah, it was interesting seeing that show. I think I got about halfway around before I was in tears. And I think it took a good 3 or 4 visits before I could actually do the whole thing without welling up. I've always loved her quote that she didn't have time to wait for women's lib. She wasn't out to change the world. She just wanted to do what she wanted to do and wasn't about to be told that she couldn't.
Fashion is for now, not for necessarily teenagers, not for necessarily being 20 and 30 and old and dead in. Fashion is for now, and if you're still enjoying living and you're still enjoying being a woman and being sexy and being alive, then one wants, surely, to wear the clothes of today. There's nothing to do with age or anything else, seems to me.